Okay, next, Canyon Bridge reopening alternatives. And we have a staff report from Edric again.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the Town Council. My name is Edric Kwan, and I'm your Public Works Director. We've assembled a team of experts to address reopening Canyon Road Bridge in the most expeditious manner as directed by you at the April 27th Town Council meeting. I want to first begin by stating that the health and safety of Moragans and members of the public who utilize our streets, roads, and public facilities is of the utmost priority to the town. The town has been diligently pursuing all available repair and funding options for this project, which is not only a health and safety concern, but inconvenient for town residents and businesses. Due to the nature and magnitude of this issue, coupled with the town's limited resources, the town is reliant on several federal funding sources and processes in order to address this project. This is not my first time, but my third local emergency affecting a major local roadway. The first two emergencies involved securing substantial federal emergency funds, and I intend on continuing my efforts pursuing outside funding through its complex process for this emergency. Our presentation will be walking you through in detail the complexity of this situation by providing you background and work completed to date, alternatives for reopening the bridge, staff's recommendation based on outside funding eligibility, timeliness, and risk, and next steps necessary to move forward with reopening the bridge. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation, since we may be answering those questions as the presentation progresses along. In this presentation, I'll begin by providing background to the Canyon Road Bridge. Kevin Tillis, President and Senior Principal Engineer for Hutgren Tillis Engineers with more than 34 years of experience, will then discuss the landslide and existing bridge conditions. Next, Lance Shree, Senior Project Manager for Quincy Engineering with more than 28 years of bridge design experience, inclusive of 13 years with Caltrans. He's designed over 100 bridges in his career, and he will outline the various alternatives to consider. Our very own Sean Knapp, Senior Civil Engineer for the town with over 17 years of experience in municipal engineering and quite frankly, very well versed in the federal funding processes. He will be next providing details on the upcoming milestones in order to execute staff's recommendation to reopen the bridge. Jack Walker, the Director of Transportation for NV5. Now this is the same firm that's already contracted with the town to design the permanent repair of the bridge, permanent replacement of the bridge, will also join in and discuss the environmental, utility relocation, and right-of-way aspects. I will end with the funding requests and next steps. Here you see a vicinity map and affected communities. The Canyon Road Bridge is located near the southern border of the town along Canyon Road. The two-lane bridge crosses over the west branch of the San Leandro Creek, also known as Moraga Creek. The concrete deck bridge was built in 1936, is more than 80 years old. The bridge deck is supported by a metal beam girder substructure on top of 4 rows of metal H-piling piers in the creek and along the creek banks. The existing bridge is relatively narrow and does not have typical modern-day safety features like pedestrian sidewalk or bicycle lanes. Canyon Road ends at a Y intersection with the south and north segments of Pinehurst Road, which leads to Castro Valley and the Oakland Hills, respectively. The community of Canyon, comprised of approximately 200 people and a small K through 8th grade school serving 69 students, is located along northern Pinehurst Road within unincorporated Contra Costa County. The bridge was used by emergency responders, regional commuters, people accessing recreational parks and trails, local school children, and Moraga and Canyon residents. Based on the latest Caltrans bridge inspection report, the average daily traffic count is 6,000 vehicles, along with significant numbers of bicyclists and pedestrians. Zooming into the nearby Canyon Road Bridge itself, you can see quite a few features here. You can see Moraga, AKA the San Leandro Creek, and Larch Creek that flows to the upper San Leandro Reservoir. You can see the Lafayette-Moraga Regional Trail that sits on East Bay Mudlands and possesses a easement by East Bay Regional Parks District. The trailhead itself connects directly to the Canyon Road. It also serves as a fire trail, and it's also used quite frequently by students who walk to Joaquin Miller Intermediate School. Alignment of this existing road is very constrained by the creek alignment and hillsides, and adjacent residents you can see on the west side. Aside from having JM Intermediate School on the east side of the project, buffered by the pear orchard, it's also on school district, and it's harvested annually at the end of September. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been planning for years. Back in 2014, the town secured a Highway Bridge Program grant and a Contra Costa Transportation Authority grant to replace Canyon Road Bridge. The Canyon Road Bridge qualified for the HBP grant program because its sufficiency rating scored 48.8 on a scale of 1 to 100, was considered structurally deficient and functionally obsolete, according to the 2013 Caltrans Bridge Inspection Report. The project followed the typical lengthy federal funding process for its approvals, and the planned replacement of the Canyon Road Bridge was anticipated prior to the recent bridge closure to occur next year, mid-2018. However, in consideration of the current bridge closure situation and the unfortunate complexity of outside agency processes and timing issues, staff does anticipate delaying construction of the permanent bridge replacement until mid-2019. Prior to landslide, the Caltrans portion of the environmental process was nearly complete. The next phases for the permanent bridge replacement are right-of-way clearance. That means obtaining all the right-of-way, easements, and relocating utilities. The engineering design, which involves preparing the plans, specifications, and estimates, and then finally construction. There's also been a movement to consider replacing the permanent bridge with a one-lane bridge to restrict outside commuters from adding traffic to our town. The single-lane bridge studies showed that the level of service, or LOS, would drop from a C to a D or F, D to F rating, A being free-flowing traffic to F being constant traffic jam. The HBP program will not fund this option. Additionally, a one-lane bridge would heavily impact neighboring schools and community traffic during peak hours and be a bottleneck if town-wide evacuation were to be enforced. If the town wants to consider this option, the town would have to fully fund the project with its own local funds to the tune of $5 million and to delay the project even further. Excuse me. The alternative approach to using secured HBP funds for the permanent bridge replacement of Canyon Road Bridge would be to enter into an agreement to privatize, and that means selling the existing bridge and right-of-way. Under this scenario, bridge tolls will be collected from local users to pay for bridge replacement and provide investor profits. Staff does not recommend changing the currently approved, fully funded federal project to privately financed toll bridge project, which would be a significant change. If the town wants to consider this option, our attorneys would need to explore the legal and environmental ramifications of this option. And not only that, this option does not accomplish getting the bridge reopened quickly. At this point, I'm going to pass it on to our next section on landslide and existing bridge condition. Thank you, Kevin.
See if I can master the clicker. Good evening, I'm Kevin Tillis. I'm with Holker & Tillis Engineers. My portion of the presentation tonight, I'm going to start with a timeline of events. You saw some of this before, and then I'm going to follow up with some pictures and show the site conditions. And then I'm going to show a little bit about the landslide, the depth of the landslide, the movement of the landslide. Basically kind of a factual summary of what's going on out there. And we'll see if I can work this. So let's start out with the timeline of events. So on Monday, April 17th, your town was notified that there was some damage at the bridge location. They did a couple things. First, they contacted Caltrans, see if they would come out do inspection. Caltrans says, no, we're not going to come out on an emergency basis. You need to do it on your own. Then they contacted consultants, which is myself, and our firm. On Monday. On Tuesday, we came out to the site. We took a look at the bridge. They also contacted engineers from NV5. Jack Walker's here with NV5, he's going to be talking later. He wasn't the one that showed up to take a look at the bridge. There was tension cracks, indication of mass landslide movement. We'll show the pictures here in a minute. You know, looking at the bridge, Bob was out there. It was pretty clear that it was damaged, and it was damaged or wasn't serviceable. It was a public safety issue, and I don't take these things lightly. I think we talked about it before. You know, closing a bridge is not something you really want to do because there's public safety implications to closing the bridge. You got to worry about the police, the fire, and these kind of things. And I talked about it, and I said, I understand. You know, we think we need to be shut down. If you monitor it full time, you could leave it open for a period of time, but you're going to have to monitor it until you can work out some of your public safety issues. And so we made the recommendation to the town that it wasn't safe, and then the town decided to close it down. Okay, the next day we started drilling borings. We put in 2 inclinometers on the next day, and later we put in 2 more inclinometers. And then we started to monitor the slides. And so since late April, things that have been done by the consultant team and your staff, we're monitoring the inclinometers. There's been coordination with the utilities, which will be discussed later, with the utilities that are going to be impacted. They've been developing alternative solutions, looking at alternatives, feasibilities have been evaluated, costs and risks of different options. And last, evaluations and preliminary design of emergency opening and bridge concept. All that will be covered in this presentation, but not by me. So I want to do a little setting here, and I don't know, I'm thinking my laser's probably not going to work, but I'm going to see if I can get the laser to work. No. Is that going to work?
Yeah, it works better.
You really can't see it, so I'll just talk to it. So the slide there, so you can see there's hard to see the numbers. The little circles, those are the borings. The circles are the borings. Borings 1 and 2 are put in first. Inclinometers, I'm going to show you some moving inclinometers here in a minute. You can see the dashed line that goes up the slope. Oh, there we go. It goes
Laser
up.
works on this, it doesn't work on.
I'm helping you.
Right. He's doing the work for me, so, which is good. And so that shows the total landslide. It goes up the slope, up to the residences up above. The cracking is quite evident, and then there's some cracking close to the residences, and that's essentially the limits of the landslide as we can tell visually. And I'm going to show you some pictures, but essentially the landslide mass, it's pushing on the southern abutment of the foundation. The south end of the bridge is displaced. Some of the foundation elements of the bridge have deformed and been damaged. It's twisted support beams and displaced the H-beams. The little white dashed line there, that would be vertical. And so you can see that that pile was vertical. We have a picture of it, or NV5 has a picture of it in the past. That's how much it moved since the landslide, and it's also twisted the foundation. This is just a kind of a close-up picture of the same thing. I got a series of pictures here that are going to show the first bent. This is from the side of the bridge. This shows that the foundation's been racked, which basically means it's twisted. It's kind of turned. Here's a similar picture. You can see from the arrows, it's pretty evident that the piling is moved laterally. It's not vertical. One of the things you want to notice is that the water's still up high. It was much higher than this during the winter. It had come down, and it's much lower now. It's, again, just a similar picture showing the bridge. This is coming from an angle there. The little white dashed line is actually the piles behind it. So you can see how both that one and the one closer to us have both displaced downhill. And they've kicked out it looks like about 12 inches it's moved, which is a significant amount of movement. This is just another picture later in the year. You can see that the water level is down now, and we're into sort of a normal creek situation. So I'm going to just show you some other deformation that occurred around the bridge. There's a gap in the southern edge of the bridge, offset striping, the wood walls pulled apart, and then we've had some tension cracks. This shows the gap in the bridge. This has been since filled in by your staff. It's on the south end. You can see a pretty good shot here of the bridge is displaced. All the striping used to line up. You can see it's actually bent even going into the bridge, and that's evidence of ground movement. This is a wall that's pulled apart. This is on the side heading up towards the residences. And then this is just some cracking on the sidewalk. And then I'm going to show you some pictures up towards the residences. Something we call a graben formed up there. There's tension cracks on the slope, and there's evidence of vertical and horizontal displacement. So when a landslide moves laterally, the ground gives, and usually the top of it drops down. And so that's the graben. You'll see the two parallel cracks there. And so that's a piece that's just basically dropped in as the ground's moved away. That's pretty significant movement. And this is a crack that's heading down the hill towards the bridge. And then this is just something for perspective on the size of the crack. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to reorient you. If I want you to see where 1 and 2 are. Edric, can you kind of point at 1 and 2 there? So we're going to show you the inclinometer there. There's little arrows that are going from there off of 1 and 2. That's the direction of movement from the inclinometers. So that's the direction the slide is moving. And then the next slide here is actually, this is the actual plots themselves, inclinometer plots. So it moved 3/4 to an inch over about 2 to 3 weeks. And then since it's essentially stopped. So since May 4th, the inclinometers are not moving, or they're not moving significantly. So what do we know about the landslide? At the inclinometer locations, it's 17 to 26 feet deep. That's relatively deep for a landslide. And that's pushing on the bridge, so it's 26 feet deep right at the toe of the bridge there. Again, it extends up to the residential properties, and the toe of it is into the creek. So this is, actually, did I miss a slide? I did. No, I didn't. Right. Okay. And this is a schematic of the landslide from one of our stability programs. So it shows the essential shape we think of the landslide, or approximate shape. So we know how deep it is at inclinometer 2. We know where the top cracks are, and we know that it goes into the creek, and so we drew a surface in there. Shows the water table about where we think it is, or was at the time the slide developed. We do have some information how deep the water is. The water level in the creek is down here in this analysis. And then for my final slide before I turn it over to Lance, so what are the geologic constraints for the bridge? So you gotta think about what's the constraints. So the existing bridge is in the landslide. The south abutment is gonna move when the landslide moves. So whatever the ground does, the bridge is gonna do. It's just gonna go for a ride, basically. We've gone through some analysis, and we think it's not feasible to protect the existing bridge from the landslide movement. We looked at some structural solutions, and they just either weren't cost effective or just simply were not engineerily feasible. So some of the alternatives for repair, you could do an earthwork repair, which is Lance gonna hit on, which is to dig the slide out, or we could move the bridge abutment away from and beyond the landslide and south of the slide, and then we'd protect the edge with some drilled piers. Just in case the slide moves again, we can sort of force the slide around the bridge abutment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lance. Lance?
Hi, Mayor, council members. My name is Lance Schrey. I work for Quincy Engineering. As Kevin pointed out, we did look at numerous alternatives. There were a couple alternatives that were dismissed early. The first of these is to build the permanent bridge now. Logically, it seems to make the most sense, take out the old bridge, put the new bridge in. However, there's emergency funds and HBP funds, and trying to mix the pots of money is difficult, and so Caltrans didn't allow that alternative. The second alternative that we dismissed fairly early was the, excuse me, trying to resist the landslide with a retaining wall. As Kevin pointed out, Kevin gave us the forces and the location of the forces, and we did some preliminary design, and we came up with 7-foot diameter shafts, spaced at 8 feet, 65 feet down in the ground. Really not constructible. With that, also, we don't know the full extent of the damage of the existing bridge. So with that, these are the 6 alternatives that we did look at. All of the alternatives, other than the do-nothing alternative, are some combination of the earthwork repair, temporary bridge, or a protection wall. The factors that we looked at when we're considering each of these alternatives was how long is it going to take until we can get the bridge reopened, what's the cost, and what's the risk level. you'll see there that we have a rating level. So in the following slides, text that's in green for these considerations are low, yellow is neutral, and the red ones are high. The first alternative that we investigated is the do-nothing alternative. This is an alternative where we wait till the permanent bridge is designed and built. We're looking at about 2.5 years. So we'd go 2.5 years without emergency services, without an evacuation route. So the risk level of this is very high. The cost is about $500,000, and that's, you're really not getting much other than, those are the costs incurred to date. The next alternative is an earthwork repair combined with the repairing the existing bridge. The earthwork repair would consist of taking out all the landslide material down below the slip plane, putting material back, compacting it, and it's probably going to require a retaining wall to help facilitate the construction of that. That is going to cost approximately $3 million. And then the extent of the bridge repair is kind of unknown. And so with that, we kind of put a range in there from anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. So this alternative costs anywhere from $3 to $4 million. This is eligible for emergency funds. I was going to elaborate, but I don't think it's needed. The next alternative is, again, we're going to use the earthwork repair. So the same thing that we used on the previous one, but instead of repairing the existing bridge, we're going to put a one-lane temporary bridge in. The temporary bridge would be approximately 125 feet long, and it'd be only one lane. This would be eligible for emergency funds, and it would be about a duration of about a year. The cost for this one is expensive at $4.6 million. The fourth alternative is very similar to the previous alternative, where we're still using the earthwork or the earth removal and replacement. However, now we're putting a two-lane temporary bridge in. Once again, it'd be 125 feet. However, this is also the most expensive alternative. It's a little bit longer than the previous alternative at 1.5 years. However, this is not eligible for emergency funds because the emergency funds pay for the bare minimum, which in essence is just a one-lane bridge. The next alternative is we're getting away from removing the dirt now. Now we're looking at putting a temporary bridge in and a protection wall. As you can see, the purple line that Kevin talked about shows the limits there of the landslide. So now we're gonna take the temporary bridge and we're gonna lengthen it, and so we're gonna have it land that southern abutment on the other side of where that limits of that landslide is. And in doing that, the bridge length gets to about 150 feet. We're also gonna put a protection wall to help, just in case the landslide moves a little bit, to protect that abutment. This is gonna cost $3.2 million, and the time factor on this is 5 months, so much better, so the risk level is much lower. However, it's a two-lane bridge again, so this wouldn't be eligible for the emergency funds. The last alternative we looked at is just like the previous alternative, but instead of the 2 lanes, now we're just looking at the 1 lane. This would be eligible for emergency funds. We're looking at reopening in about 4 months, and the cost is just barely over $2 million, and the risk level is very low. And with that, I'm gonna give it to Sean, and he can go through the recommendations.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Sean Knapp with the Town of Moraga staff here, senior engineer. I'm going to go through a table here quickly. Lance has gone into great detail about these options, and I'm just going to highlight them and get down to where the staff recommendation is by going through this quickly. Again, the first option that we considered was the do-nothing option, which project cost would be $500,000, which include costs to date in maintaining the site in a safe manner till we build a permanent bridge. Again, this is ineligible for emergency funding, the funding that we have spent so far, since we are not seeking emergency funding. Reimbursement would be incurred at the expense of the town. We consider this a risk of high because of that. A second alternative that we considered was repairing the existing bridge with the earthwork, the extensive earthwork option. Again, this earthwork hillside repair would be not on town property. And again, we'd have to attain rights to access and repair that. The high costs at $3 to $3.9 million. And it would be eligible for emergency funding, and with a duration of about approximately 1 year. We consider this a moderate risk, and for those reasons, we don't recommend it. The third option was the installation of a one-lane bridge, still using the earthwork repair. This is eligible for emergency funding at $4.6 million with approximate duration of 1.5 years to complete. We consider this a moderate risk level and still consider this, for those reasons, not a desired option. The fourth option was to install the two-lane short bridge. Because of the additional non-essential capacity, it's ineligible for the emergency funding. It would cost $5.1 million and with a duration of 1.5 years to complete. We consider this a moderate risk and not a recommended alternative. The fifth option is the installation of the two-lane short bridge with the Sutter and Button protection, getting away from the complex hillside stabilization. And that's also not eligible because of the two-lane configuration, and the cost would be $3.2 million, but with a much sooner turnaround of 5 months. We consider this risk level much lower because of the lower cost and faster turnaround on completing the project. But again, not a recommended option because of the inability to get emergency funds for this. Finally, alternative number 6 that we do recommend is the one-lane configuration, long span bridge over the slide area with a southern abutment protection at a price of $2.06 million with an estimated time to completion 4 months, barring any difficulties or delays relative to environmental permitting and utility relocations. We consider this a low risk and recommend that from a staff standpoint as a preferred alternative. I'll just repeat kind of the highlights of this particular option. Again, it's the shortest duration to open the bridge. It's the lowest cost at $2.06 million, eligible for reimbursement federal funds if they're approved, and it has the lowest risk level associated with it. At this point, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Jack Walker with NV5. He'll go into some of the details about the risk factors with any of these projects as we move forward.
Good evening. I'm Jack Walker with NV5, and I'm going to be discussing the environmental studies, utility relocations, and right-of-way. Regarding environmental studies, this project will require environmental clearances and permits. This project will, of course, require approvals from Caltrans and environmental resource agencies. This slide shows a list of the approvals and permits that'll be required to build this project. Currently, the environmental staff that has worked on the environmental studies for the permanent bridge project have started working on the requirements for the clearance of this project option. And basically, regarding this being an emergency project, We basically will be ultimately to do emergency consultation with Army Corps to hopefully facilitate streamlining this process. Regarding utility relocations, there's 3 existing utilities at the project site, PG&E, AT&T, and Sprint. The Sprint line, fiber optics line, is actually attached to the existing bridge currently, and so, of course, it'll need to be relocated. The plan for the Sprint line is to relocate it, and it'll go underneath the creek with a directional boring. AT&T is an overhead line that goes over the current existing bridge and is in conflict. And so the plan would be to relocate that to the PG&E poles that are along the west side of the existing bridge. The PG&E line along the west side of the bridge, we've located the temporary bridge to avoid the relocation of the PG&E line. And this allows at the time that it would take to relocate and find easements and acquire easements for PG&E. So at this point, we do not see that as being a relocation. We may need to de-energize that line at certain points during construction in order to construct the temporary bridge. Regarding right-of-way, we've laid out the temporary bridge to minimize the right-of-way needs as much as possible. We all know that the right-of-way acquisition process can be a long duration. So at this point, we only foresee a temporary construction easement that's going to be required from East Bay Mud. Regarding environmental protection, if needed to remove the existing bridge, there could be a need for creek diversions to allow the removal of the existing bridge. And also there could be other environmental protection measures that'll need to be put in place based on the requirements of the environmental permits. For the coordinating with all these utility companies and the environment agencies, of course, there is risk that this could affect the project schedule, but we are doing everything we can at this time to coordinate and keep all the third parties involved in what's going on in order to lessen any risk to affect the project schedule. And at this point, I thank you, and I'd like to pass it back on to Sean.
Thank you, Jack. So I'm going to continue on through the slides and kind of illustrate the next steps of this particular alternative. So the first step would be that after the relocation of the utilities would be the demolition of the existing bridge to occur sometime in mid-August. In your package, your staff report package, initially this was anticipated to occur in late July based on information that we received from Sprint and their fiber optics relocation process. We've moved back the demolition period to mid-August. The demolition of the bridge is not a critical path item. And as such, it will not drastically affect our schedule. So we don't anticipate any issues because of that. We had talked about earlier the magnitude that we're trying to protect the bridge, and in doing so, we would be drilling 50 feet or deeper piers on the southern side of the bridge that protect the abutment for this bridge. You can see visually, they'd be large piers, 4 foot in diameter, drilled deep into the earth. On top of those piers would be a structurally enhanced abutment, foundation abutment that would sit on top of those piers. And on top of that, the temporary bridge would be attached to. The one-lane bridge as proposed would be constructed in mid-September. Would have a clear lane of approximately 14 feet wide for traffic under a two-way monitoring system of a traffic light. We would attach, as proposed, a 5-foot wide sidewalk to the side of this bridge, a temporary bridge for pedestrian access, and try to reestablish the access for pedestrians and others to utilize the regional trails that are nearby. We looked at multiple options for bridge acquisition, including borrowing from other agencies, but we found no agency that had a bridge of this length and was willing to lend it to us, because that would leave them in a situation where they would not be prepared for such situation that we're facing today. So we eliminated that option. We looked at purchasing a bridge, and based on your staff report, there is some example using a 2-year analysis and calculations that from the one quote that we received so far, the bridge cost would be $423,600. Talking to the emergency relief managers that would fund such a project for us, they've told us that they'd have to amortize the cost of the bridge over an expected 30-year period. And so basically, with that cost of bridge, we'd be basically every year being able to be reimbursed for every year of that usage, about $14,000, $14,000 per year. If we use the bridge for 2 years, it's basically $28,000 back from reimbursement, and we've been told that the resale value of a bridge is about 25% or 25 cents on the dollar. And so again, we would be just over $100,000 to resell the bridge, and with that minimal reimbursement rates because of the amortization, the town would be responsible for the additional costs or the costs not reimbursable, about $289,000 for the bridge. From that analysis, we don't recommend purchasing a bridge. It appeared, initially we were hoping that that would be 100% reimbursement, but with the amortization, we'd have to use the bridge for a long period of time, which is not planned, as we have a replacement bridge project that is going to come forth within a few years. So renting the bridge is the most economical, and it's 100% reimbursable during the first 180 days after an incident. And from that point on, after 180 days, the reimbursement ratio reduces down to 88.53%. So we do recommend renting a bridge as a scenario to move forward. Illustration-wise, I'd like to show you a few pictures of what a temporary bridge would look like when installed. Here's another example with a 5-foot sidewalk walkway along the edge of the bridge. This diagram illustrates how the bridge would be launched or put into position. The top illustration shows the use of a crane to drag it across, which would be the creek, basically drag it across the opening and set it in place. The second way of launching it, which depending on ability to have large equipment, which is we do have limited ability in this area, it could be pushed into place with the bridge being counterweighted as it's being pushed in place and installed over time. The next action would be erecting a portable traffic signal system to control one-way traffic across the bridge. And this would open up approximately late September to early October. The last step, of course, would be removing the, after installing the temporary bridge, when the first half of the permanent bridge is constructed, we'd be able to provide one-way traffic onto the permanent bridge, and the temporary bridge could be removed, so the second half of the permanent bridge could be constructed. I'll do a little short illustration of how we've choreographed all the different components into place here. First, we'll start out with, we'll be installing the protection at the southern side for the landing or abutments of the temporary bridge. And of course, remembering this is being done in place because we have a landslide just to the west of the current area where the bridge is located. We would install deep piered abutments for the bridge to sit on, and install the temporary bridge on the west side of the roadway. We would install a temporary traffic control system to control one-way traffic through the area, and open it up. In the next phase, we start construction of the permanent bridge shown in green here. And we've moved the permanent bridge as east as possible. We're constrained by the alignment of the creek, but we've been able to design it in such a manner that we could have the temporary bridge and the permanent bridge in construction or in operation at the same time. Once the permanent bridge is constructed and we're able to get traffic onto it, we'll remove the temporary bridge and continue building the permanent bridge and open it up at the end. At this point, I'd like to hand back the presentation to Edric to talk about the finances of the project.
Thank you, Sean. So this is straight from your staff report. It does describe what the expenditure plan is. It is a budget. And as you can tell here, there's a lot of pieces, a lot of expenses. And more importantly, the rental of the bridge is a mere $283,000. And despite what everyone says about fixing this for a mere few $100,000, it's a lot more than that. So this is to clearly illustrate the complexity and all the costs associated for us to reopen the bridge. And because we want to get this work started, we are requesting of the council to appropriate some budget right now, and that would entail $500,000 from Palos, as well as $1.06 million from the general fund reserves. And this is in addition to the $500,000 that town council had appropriated back on April 27th, for a total of $2.06 million. So with this local fund, we're able to proceed with the construction of all the phases that were described. But in parallel, we are working with the federal agencies to secure emergency grants to the best of our abilities. And so I want to illustrate a timeline on what's been done so far in relation to the FEMA Public Assistance Program. So on Tuesday, April 25th, the town submitted requests for public assistance from both California and federal funding sources through the California Office of Emergency Services. On Thursday, May 25th, OES and FEMA staff met with the town to conduct a FEMA recovery scoping meeting. This meeting outlined what eligible costs are considered reimbursable and started the 60-day window to submit all disaster damage records and associated costs for which the town is applying for reimbursement. Eligible repair work is 75% reimbursable with a required 25% local match. In some cases, OES will also reimburse back a portion of the town's 25% match. On Wednesday, June 7th, FEMA representatives notified the town that FEMA denied the town's public assistance request because FHWA is the lead federal agency for bridges and roadway emergency projects. Staff subsequently submitted the damage description and dimensions form to allow the town to appeal the FEMA decision if needed in the future. Based on FEMA's feedback, the town will focus working with FHWA for emergency relief program funds. Regarding the FHWA emergency relief program, it does have two sub-programs, emergency opening and permanent restoration. Emergency opening funding is for work that is to be diligently pursued and is needed for restoring essential travel, minimizing the extent of damage, or protecting the remaining facilities in a damaged transportation system. Eligible emergency opening work completed within the first 180 days of disaster is 100% reimbursable. Work completed after 180 days is reimbursed at 88.53%. Another restriction to the emergency opening funding is that Caltrans must authorize bidding the permanent bridge replacement within 2 years and construction within 6 months after. If this is not achieved, the temporary bridge work will not be ineligible for reimbursement, which means we cannot have a temporary bridge out there for 10 years. And this is very similar to the sinkhole. All the work that has been completed to date fell under the emergency opening category. And just like the sinkhole, when we went out to bid, that is the next sub-program called permanent restoration. And so that funding is for work that is needed to restore the facility to before incident condition. Eligible permanent restoration work is reimbursed at 88.53%. The permanent bridge replacement is not eligible for this particular permanent restoration funds since it's already funded by the Highway Bridge Program, as I discussed earlier in the presentation. The town staff and Caltrans have been working diligently together since the inception of the emergency, despite rumors that they have not been involved. On Tuesday, April 26th, a site meeting with Caltrans was scheduled to access and gain their initial input on our emergency. On Tuesday, May 9th, the town submitted the damage assessment form to Caltrans to start the process. The estimate submitted in the DAF is only an estimate. The important thing is to define the scope of work. At completion of construction, the town will be reimbursed for the actual cost if different than the estimate, keeping in mind that the scope has not changed. On Friday, May 19th, Caltrans reviews the DAF and requests detailed response from town, which includes additional data that we've gathered from the installed inclinometers. Additionally, since the scope must be defined, the outcome of this town council meeting is critical and your direction to staff is needed to move forward with this process. The next steps for the town is to provide a DAF response to Caltrans for their review. Afterwards, after Caltrans approval, they'll forward the DAF to FHWA for their final approval of emergency opening funding. So today, we're asking for you to adopt a resolution. The resolution would include accepting the recommendation for the emergency opening bridge rental alternative with southern abutment protection. It'll also direct staff to proceed with the emergency contracting for the Canyon Road Bridge reopening project and appropriate the necessary funds, $500,000 Palos, $1.06 million from general fund reserves, towards the project for a total of $2.06 inclusive of the $500,000 from April 27th, so we can get started right away with the schedule. There's a lot of information, and with a lot of information, we provide many different outlets for the public to access. And so we encourage folks to check out our webpage, to also register with Nixle and get up-to-date press releases, as well as other emergencies through town or information that may affect them. Next door is also a very great community forum, and we also post our various press releases through that venue. We have our About Town news article that comes out approximately 2 times a month, and you can either go online or request to be put on a mailing list, and we're happy to provide you that newsletter that includes information as well as other great information about the town. And lastly, just contact us. We're happy to talk to anybody, answer any questions. Just contact our number at 925-888-7025 or email us. We really want to thank the community members. We really understand what a health and safety issue this is. We understand the inconvenience, the challenges of emergency services, the destruction that can occur if something happened in Indian Valley and not having access from our MOFD partners. So we really do appreciate the community for their patience. We are doing the best that we can to provide the fastest response despite the complex outside processes that we have to endure. And lastly, the town council for your direction on April 27th to tell us that we need to do what we can to accomplish this task and to bring back to you our recommendations. With that, if you have any questions, we're here to answer. Thank you.